Welcome back, everybody. Ready for another deep dive?
Always ready to dig in.
Well, today we're heading to the Pacific Island.
Ooh, sounds nice.
Yeah, well, not exactly a vacation. We're looking at a situation in a small village church in Samoa. It really got me thinking about leadership, tradition, and, how those things sometimes clash with, well, with fairness.
Right. Always tricky waters to navigate.
Exactly. So basically, the situation is this. We've got a pastor, dedicated guy, been serving his congregation for 6 years, takes a planned break, like a sabbatical, and when he's ready to come back, he finds out he's been replaced.
Ooh, yeah, that's got to sting. And 6 years, that's a pretty significant chunk of time. Not like he just popped in for a quick visit.
No, not at all. And that's where things get interesting, right? Because it makes you wonder, what's going on here? Is this like standard procedure in Samoan churches?
So it's not quite as simple as that. Samoan churches, they often have this traditional structure. See, pastors serve for a 6-year period, yep, and then there's this thing called a relief period. It's intended to give the pastor a chance to rest up, maybe reflect, and get ready for potentially more service.
I see. So the break itself isn't unusual. But to replace him during the break, that's what seems, well, kind of harsh.
Yeah, I get that. And that's the thing. The source material we're looking at, it doesn't really lay out the specific reasons behind the church's decision. Just says they appointed a new pastor while the first guy was away.
That's frustrating. I mean, you'd think after 6 years they'd at least, want to hear him out, get his side of the story. Makes you wonder if there's some other issues going on behind the scenes, right? Maybe some folks weren't happy with his leadership style, or I don't know, maybe they just wanted to change.
Yeah, it could be any number of things. Cultural expectations, maybe, or like you said, some disagreements within the congregation. It's tough to say without more information, but it does bring up some interesting questions, like how we balance tradition with individual needs, and especially in a faith community.
Yeah, totally. And it got me thinking about some verses from the Bible, actually. Like Hebrews 13:77, it talks about obeying and submitting to your spiritual leaders. Sounds pretty clear-cut, right? Respect their authority, follow their lead.
Right, right. But then you've got something like Galatians 6.9, which encourages us to persevere, to keep doing good and trust that in due time we'll reap a harvest. And those two, they could be interpreted in very different ways when you apply them to this situation.
It's like, on one hand, you're supposed to obey and submit to your leader, even when they're, temporarily stepping back. But on the other hand, you've got this idea of persevering, like maybe a call to keep serving, even when things get tough.
Exactly. A real head scratcher, isn't it? So how do you reconcile that? Was the church actually justified in replacing this guy even though he planned to come back? Or was this a case of like overlooking his service and not giving him a fair chance?
Tough call. I mean, it does make you wonder about the qualities of a good leader, right? The Bible definitely has something to say about that.
Absolutely, yeah. 1 Timothy 3.1-7 lays it all out. Above reproach, temperate, self-controlled, respectable, hospitable, a good teacher.
Wow, that's quite the list. Does our source give us any hints about whether this pastor lived up to those standards? Was his leadership style maybe a factor in their decision?
Well, here's the thing. The source, it stays pretty quiet on that front. No real judgment calls about the pastor's style or, whether he was meeting those biblical ideals. So we're kind of left in the dark there.
So where does that leave us? Is there even a right or wrong answer here?
Honestly, it's complicated. We just don't have all the pieces. Was this church like stuck on that 6-year rule no matter what? Or were there deeper issues that pushed them to find new leadership? Without knowing more, it's impossible to say if their decision was, truly justified.
Yeah, I hear you. It really highlights the tension that can exist between the tradition and individual needs, especially in a faith setting. Like, where do we draw the line?
Exactly. And it got me thinking, could this kind of thing happen in other cultures, other contexts, maybe even in our own communities? It's a question worth pondering.
Absolutely. And that's what's so cool about these deep dives. We start with this story from a tiny village church halfway across the world and end up facing questions that, they resonate everywhere.
For sure. It reminds us that leadership, tradition, faith, it's all intertwined. And sometimes the most thought-provoking situations are the ones without easy answers.
Couldn't agree more. Lots to think about, listeners. Until next time, keep diving deep.